You already know how a samurai battle ends. The banners fall, the line breaks, the survivors ride home through the smoke, and the story stops there, because that is where the paintings stop. That is not where it stopped. For the men standing on that field, the fighting was the simple part. The real work began at dusk. It was quiet, it was slow, and it was done kneeling. Somewhere behind the lines tonight, a woman whose name you will never learn is washing a stranger's face. She is combing his hair. She is doing it gently, the way you would prepare someone for a wedding. In 1 hour, she will carry him out to a warlord for inspection. Why would anyone take such care? Hold on to that question. Everything else in this story bends around it. Start with the thing that sounds unbelievable until you see how the system worked. In the age of the samurai, a severed head was not a trophy, it was paperwork. Understand what a warrior was actually fighting for. Not honor in the abstract, not the emperor, who reigned in Kyoto but ruled almost nothing. He was fighting for ansho, meaning reward, and reward meant land, and land meant your son's aid, and your name continued. But a lord could not pay every man who claimed he had done something brave. He needed proof. And in a world with no photographs, no witnesses you could trust, and no way to check a story told 3 provinces away, proof had a face.
So the men who did the killing carried the evidence with them. You can see how seriously this was taken in a document that still exists. In the 13th century, a warrior named Takezaki Suenaga fought against the Mongol invasions that struck Kyushu in 1274 and 1281. He was not a great lord. He was a minor landholder from Higo, and when the fighting was over, he could not get anyone to acknowledge what he had done. So he traveled the length of the country to Kamakura, argued his case in person, and eventually commissioned an illustrated scroll of the whole affair, the Moko Shurai Ekotoba, painted around 1293. It survives. In it, you see him writing, bleeding, insisting. A man built an entire artwork out of the fear that his service would go unrecorded. That fear is the engine under everything that follows. Now look at what the record says about the fighting itself, because it contradicts the picture in your head. The historian Thomas Conlon examined the surviving gunchujo, the battle reports that warriors submitted to certify their wounds in their claims from 14th century Japan. When he counted the causes of injury, the overwhelming majority came from arrows, not sword duels. Arrows, then spears, then stones, and later, guns. The sword was a sidearm.
The famous single combat, 2 named warriors calling out their lineage before crossing blades, existed. But it was never the arithmetic of a battlefield. So how did a man prove he had done anything at all, in a chaos of arrows and mud and identical armor? He proved it with the head. There was a whole apparatus for this, and once you know it exists, the battlefield changes shape. A warrior carried a kubibukuro, a head bag, or lashed his claim to his saddle. A tag went with it, marked with the taker's name and, if he could learn it, the name of the taken. Foot soldiers who could not read had it done for them. An Edo period manual written from the perspective of common infantry, the Zohyo Monogatari, gives blunt, practical advice about all of this, the way a modern field guide might tell you how to file a claim. And when the fighting stopped, the claims had to be judged. This is the ritual. It is called kubi jikken, which translates almost too plainly as head inspection. It was not a mob scene. It was closer to a court, and it had rules that were written down and taught. Picture the ground where it happened, a cleared space behind the camp or a courtyard inside a castle. Water is brought, the heads are washed, blood is cleaned from the hair, and the hair is combed, and the top knot is retied properly.
The face is powdered. In many accounts, the teeth are blackened, the way a court aristocrat blackened his, because blackened teeth signaled rank, and a head of rank was worth more than a head of none. Some accounts even claim warriors blackened their own teeth before riding out, so their head would be judged worth keeping if the day went badly. The evidence for that is thinner than the story suggests, and honest historians treat it as custom remembered rather than fact documented. But the direction of the effort is not in doubt. The dead were being made presentable. Each head is then set on a wooden board, and the board is set on a stand, and the presentation begins. The lord does not lounge. The etiquette schools that codified warrior conduct, the kojitsu traditions carried by houses like the Issei and the Ogasawara, laid out how a commander should sit, from which side the head should be brought, which direction it should face, how far away he should stay, and how he should hold his own expression. He is supposed to look calm. He is supposed to look at the face. A commander who flinched in front of his retainers had failed a test that everyone present understood. And then the vengeful part, the part nobody says out loud. There was a widespread belief that the eyes of the dead could still see, that a head could bite, that a slighted spirit could ruin the man who slighted it.
So you did not laugh. You did not gloat where the face could hear you. Sometimes the head was addressed directly, by name, with something close to courtesy. Do you see what this actually is? A man is being paid for a killing, and the payment ceremony requires him to treat the killed with the manners of a guest. That tension held for centuries, and then, on a New Year's Day in 1574, someone broke it. The chronicler Otagi Michi served Oda Nobunaga and wrote the Shinsho Koki, the closest thing we have to a first-hand record of Japan's most feared unifier. Gyuichi describes a banquet at the start of that year. Nobunaga had destroyed the Asakura and the Azai the previous autumn. At the banquet, the skulls of Asakura Yoshikage and of Azai Hisamasa and his son Nagamasa were brought out, lacquered and gilded, and displayed to his commanders. Nagamasa was Nobunaga's own brother-in-law. Nobunaga's sister had been his wife. You have probably heard the version where Nobunaga drinks sake from the skulls. That detail is a later embellishment, and the chronicle does not support it. What the chronicle supports is stranger, because it is colder. The objects were not smashed, and they were not hidden. They were finished, decorated, and shown, as art is shown. That is the moment the ritual turns inside out.
For generations, preparing a head was an act of grim respect that also happened to serve the accounting. Nobunaga kept the polish and threw away the respect. He understood something the etiquette manuals never wrote down, which is that a ceremony everyone believes in can be aimed like a weapon. Every man in that room had a family, a domain, and a name that could end. They were being shown exactly what the end looked like, gold-leafed at a New Year's feast. Now come back to the woman with the comb, because she is the answer to the question you have been carrying. The washing and the dressing of the heads was frequently done by women, the wives, daughters, and attendants inside the castle. There are accounts of noble women performing it, and Edo period retellings turned it into a mark of a warrior household's composure. Think about what that work required. You are handling the face of the man who may have killed your husband's retainers this morning, and your task is to make him beautiful. Here is why it mattered so much. The head was going to be identified, and identification is only possible if the face is legible. Then it might be displayed, and a lord's reputation traveled with the state of the dead in his care. And after that, more often than the myth of endless brutality allows, it was sent home. Heads were returned to enemy families under truce. They were buried. Mounds were raised over them, called kubizuka, and priests were paid to pray at them, sometimes by the very lord who ordered the killing. That is the whole logic in one line. He was prepared with care because tomorrow, on ground very much like this, he could be you. So which was it, in the end? An act of respect for a fellow warrior, or theater staged for the men watching? Sit with that one, because the samurai themselves never fully separated the two. And when the scale changed, the ritual could not hold. Between 1592 and 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi launched 2 invasions of Korea. Heads were too bulky to ship home across the sea in the numbers his commanders wanted credited, so noses were taken instead, packed in salt, and counted against written receipts. The accounting survived, the ceremony did not. In 1597, the collected remains were buried in Kyoto under a mound that still stands near the site of Hideyoshi's great temple. It is called Mimizuka, the Mound of Ears. Korean visitors still come to it, and the argument over what Japan owes that mound has never really closed. Which brings you to a small patch of grass in the middle of a modern city. Walk into Koramachi in central Tokyo, one of the most valuable business districts on earth. Glass towers and banks and men in dark suits crossing at the light.
Between two of those towers, there is a stone monument on ground that was never redeveloped. It is a kubizuka, a head mound, and the head it commemorates belonged to Taira no Masakata, a warrior who declared himself the new emperor and was killed in 940. The land has been left alone through fire, earthquake, wartime destruction, and one of the most aggressive property markets in history. The site is maintained, offerings appear. There is a persistent tradition among the offices around it that you do not arrange your desk so your back is turned toward the mound. And while any single company will smile and call it superstition, the plot is still there, and the flowers are still fresh, and the ground is still not for sale. Someone still washes that face. So no, the battle did not end when the killing stopped. It ended hours later, in a quiet courtyard, with clean water and a comb, and a warlord holding his expression steady in front of a man he had destroyed. That was the part the paintings left out, and it is the part that never quite finished. In the middle of the most expensive real estate in Japan, a 1,000-year-old ritual is still going, and every commuter who crosses that intersection is walking past the end of a battle nobody bothered to tell them about.